Welcome, friends, to the Someone Gets Me podcast. I am your host, Dianne A, and I am so delighted that you're here. This podcast was created because I believe there is a visionary leader inside each one of us who is waiting to be seen. In each episode of Someone Gets Me, you will hear useful tips from successful visionaries who will share their stories about how being seen has allowed them to take their vision out into the world with action. Hi friends, it's Dianne again at Someone Gets Me. And as promised, I have on the phone Mr. Kenny Loggins for his second interview. And I'm sure you'll remember from interview number 1, where he said he would answer whatever questions I came up with for round 2. Well, I have been thinking of some kind of fun and interesting questions, and ones that I think he will be surprised with because, of course, he asked me not to tell him what they are. So, welcome back to the show, Kenny.
It's good to be back, I think. We'll see.
We'll see if you still feel that way when we're done, right?
Yeah.
Well, the first thing I would like to talk about is you recently were in Hawaii at the Songwriting Festival, helping other people writing songs and teaching and learning and all of that stuff, mostly teaching. And when I think of you as this like wise mentor that kind of floats through and shares wisdom, probably in ways a lot of people aren't even realizing that that's what you're sharing. So what was a profound moment for you at that time at that songwriting festival?
Well, I had a couple of them. One was that last year when I did the festival, I would teach or do a class of about 8 to 10 kids or young people at one time. And this year they decided to, because they had such a large enrollment, I had 15 people at one time and only an hour and a half to work with them. So I had to move much more quickly and sort of critique whatever they brought in to show me and give them whatever advice or ideas I could as quickly as possible. And it was interesting for me because I've been out of the songwriting process for about 6 years. And it was interesting for me to be reminded of how much I actually know at the craft I've been doing all my life. And but the real wake-up call was at the end when we stayed for what they call an immersive, which is where music directors and song pluggers show up with the companies. Basically, there are movie companies, TV shows, advertising companies that are looking for music for their product or for their movie or a character in a show. And so they come in with what they call briefs, and you read a brief or two. Well, they had like 30 or 40 briefs from different music directors, all looking for particular types of songs. And I thought that I would be in a mentorship role and continue to guide young writers into writing for a particular purpose, like the old days when I wrote for movies. And instead, I was thrown into the pool of writers. And so I found myself writing with 1 or 2 young beginner writers, and then maybe another more seasoned writer as well. And so in a matter of 4 days, I got to write 3 songs with other songwriters and go back into the collaboration lab. And it was a really fun wake-up call to get back into that stream of awareness where ideas are coming outside of the rational mind, and to really connect to that part of myself that seems to know what to do, even when I don't logically think I do know what to do. So that for me was my biggest wake-up call of why I went to teach, was also, of course, to learn.
Oh, that's amazing. I love those kinds of wake-up calls, because something that's so natural to your being, you don't really all the time realize, how amazing it is until you get to do it again. That's a great wake-up call. I love that.
Yeah, and I've been away for so long that I sort of figured, well, there's no real music industry out there for me anymore, so I didn't feel to write. But in the process of writing with writers who are not performing artists, they're just songwriters, I got to see that there are a lot of avenues left to write for, movies, television shows, even advertisements, which is not necessarily my thing, but I can do it. So let's see where it goes. But I wrote a song with a young Hawaiian girl named Kalana, and in the process now, there's a movie has come up for me that I'm writing with, and I showed them. They said, well, we need a love theme for this one scene. I said, well, I just wrote one, and check this out. And I played it for them, and they were like, yeah, that could really, really work. So already, there's a possibility of having something major come from just writing one ballad.
There's no accident in that synergy, that's for sure. That's so cool. I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. So if there was a young person who was like kind of an inspiring songwriter and they're kind of listening to us and they'd like, wow, what's one thing, what's a couple tips that you would tell somebody who's thinking about it but doesn't really even know what first steps to take? What is something they could do to see if it's really something for them or not?
Well, primarily, don't think in terms of writing for anything yet. If you're just beginning to write, use it as a way of journaling your thoughts or emotional reality, and maybe put a melody to it if that's your direction, or just be a prose writer. But use it as a way to express what's in your heart and how you feel about yourself in your life, and get in touch with that part of yourself. And in that way, it's like a journal. And the more honest you can be with that, as a songwriter in particular, the more people you'll reach.
Right. So it seems like when you write like with that depth from your heart, like you do, that it really touches people. And so then it reaches them on a way that transcends just superficial like words and things. So that makes complete sense.
Yeah, people think that that songwriting can be too personal, and there's no such thing. We're all basically living through the same story. And the more you can write about your story in as direct and as honest, as vulnerable a way as possible, the more people will relate to what it is you're writing.
That is so true. I agree with you 100%. It's so true. That vulnerability is so powerful, and it's risky for some people. I have somebody I'm working with now who's like really she has these great ideas, and she's nervous about being vulnerable in the world, like being exposed and people seeing that depth of her. But yet that's where the power is, though,
That's the power in all levels. That's the most healing thing for her.
Right.
And it's the most healing thing for the listener.
Exactly. So when she hears this podcast interview, maybe she hears it out of your mouth too. She'll believe me some more. Oh, it's so cute. Sometimes we have to hear things in multiple ways, right?
Right. Always.
So changing subjects a little bit, when either in your personal life or when you've been mentoring other people, what are some ways that you handle when you get to the place where you're overthinking? Like in your head more than you in your heart. What do you do to help yourself get back in your heart?
I call you.
You call me. Okay.
That is always a challenge, because quite often the head tries to take charge of everything. For me, I just have to trust that my heart's going to win in the long run. No matter what, my head may put up a hell of a fight. That's just sort of the way my path has been, balancing act between the two. There are things we can do, and I'm sure you teach them through your podcast and your website, teaching about grounding, teaching about meditation and breathing and getting in touch with your feelings, getting back into what the heart wants to do. I think for me, in this case, Dianne, I'd need a more particular example, because there's so many versions of that. Like even the songwriting thing. I've been in writing situations where everybody's trying to write a pop tune for a particular goal, and it's very difficult to get to the heart of the matter when I'm collaborating with people who only want to get it done. But if you're talking about love and relationship, that's a different.
So I think you did answer it though, for in a global sense too, which is kind of what I was going after, and that is staying with the heart of the matter and coming out of your head. And whether it's a songwriting or a relationship or something that you just want to bring forward to emerge out of our own spirit, is just stay with our heart and not allow our head to kind of run away with the show and interfere all the time.
Yeah, it's a balancing act. That's why you and I started talking about the light workers instruction manual, because my head wants to help so much that it's constantly trying to analyze the situation and figure out the quickest way to wherever it thinks I should be going.
Mm-hmm.
And the intellect is so connected to the ego that I'm constantly dealing with that tug of war, and then the heart. I have this talk with my son who's 26, and the heart has a whole different plan. And when I can just sort of breathe into it and let my heart lead, it doesn't necessarily, if ever, go where I think I want it to go, but it's going to go in a direction where there's more joy and more peace. And I just have to sort of sit back and let me go there. And it sounds so vague, I try to tell, when I was talking to my son, I said, he thinks at 26 that he's got to pick a something that he's going to have to go to school and learn to do. And I constantly say, well, what is it you love to do? Where he loves to work with children. He loves yoga. He loves exercise. He loves gardening. He went to school and graduated in sustainable agriculture. There are certain things that really speak to his heart. I said, just follow those things. Go where the fun is and see what emerges from that. And I think whatever job you're supposed to be doing will find you.
Yes, I agree with that. I think that's the perfect way to let our heart lead, and our brain gets to come along. Our mind and our intellect and ego get to come along because they're vital parts, but they don't get to drive the bus.
Yeah, let the heart make the decisions and let the mind figure out how to do that.
Exactly. Exactly. So when was the last time you felt awe? And can you talk about that a little bit?
Wow. Well, that comes to me as an awareness of being in love. That when I'm in that situation where I'm looking in her eyes and my heart opens, and there's a level of awe to that catches me by surprise.
That's beautiful.
And that's the biggest awe, and not like awe when you look at kittens on YouTube, but like awe like you're referring to.
Right. And there's no words for that awe.
I'm constantly caught by surprise. It's not something the mind comprehends.
Mm-hmm.
And so it can't manufacture it. I always say my mind tries to take credit for it or tell me that it doesn't exist. But it can't conjure it up. I can't remember it, really.
Mm-hmm.
I recognize it, but I can't make myself think I'm seeing it. And so when it comes up, it's always awestruck. I'm always awestruck because it's something you can't really recall. You know what I mean? The mind can't actually grasp love.
Right, like the mind can't wrap itself around it. So when it catches us by surprise, it's just kind of there and it's powerful. Yeah. And words are pedestrian in that moment because they just don't even apply.
I just say, oh my God.
Yeah.
That's what you look at it and go, oh.
Yeah.
That's about it. Those are the only words I have to describe.
Yeah, that's true. Oh my God. Oh my God. Yeah. So you've been on this amazing awakening path for years and years and years, and you're so focused on your own growth and everything. And I'm curious about, if you look at your life today versus, looking back over your life, would you say that your life is more joyful today than maybe before you even started all of this work? And like, has it been worth it to go through all the transformation and awakening and challenges that you've gone through in your life?
Absolutely. Yeah, when the joy when I let the joy in, it's deeper and it's like the colors are brighter and it's a full body kind of thing. When I look back at my youth and the periods of time where we would be, my buddies and I, or whatever, would be in a situation where we were blissing out, there was always a quality of this is great, what else is there? And I think that's what keeps those of us who feel like we're searching, that's what keeps us moving forward, is that sense of what else is there, what am I missing?
Mm-hmm.
And then as we do our individual work and start to shed the things that are the beliefs that are in the way of living more consciously, then when joy shows up, it shows up in a full body kind of way. It's like a fully permeating quality of a sense of arrival. But my theory is that because I'm in a body, it'll always come and go. It moves around. That sense of arrival doesn't last because we're always also in process. I know that we read about gurus who have achieved a level of awareness where they're conscious God consciousness, and I don't think I know anybody who's fully there. I mean, I've met Ram Dass back in the old days and got to speak with him for a while. I did work with Maharishi and Guru Mai, the SRF, Self-Realization Fellowship. And they are people who claim to be in this all the time. But I don't know for sure. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yes, you answered it perfectly. It's one of those things that's just kind of interesting when we see like the path of our paths, like our own individual paths that are also the collective path, like, the challenges and the ups and the downs and the joy and the awe and things are better and more as we awaken, but yet the road can be a little rocky at the same time. So I think you described it perfectly.
Well, it seems like your question was to really the question is, why bother? Why,
Yes.
Why do some people seem to constantly be on a path? Is there an arrival? Do you ever get to where you think you want to go? And I think that the draw towards consciousness is like the moth to the flame. I mean, I don't think we have a choice. At least those we're speaking to through your avenues, the people that contact you, why do I seem like the Martian in my family? Why am I so strange? Why is life seem to be calling me to other places? And there's just that quality that you're drawn to consciousness and you don't know why. And there are some people who don't give a damn and can float through whatever reality they've chosen to be in. But there are others of us who are constantly trying to wake up. And I think there's a reason. I feel in my gut that there's this time that's been coming towards us. If then I can hear my son saying, "Dad, there's no such thing." That we're moving towards a moment where consciousness is going to be really, really important. And we're also in that moment. The paradox of that statement, where it's really important right now, but I think it's going to become in the next 20 years, 10 years, it's going to become even more important that there be a large group of people who have achieved some level of consciousness that can shift the survival and the evolution of the species on this planet, if that's meant to be.
Absolutely. I completely agree with it. I feel that feeling in my gut too, like it's moving toward us. That's the only way to describe it. It's like we're moving toward it, it's moving toward us, and it feels like it's speeding up a little bit, like having
It
consciousness
does.
and really getting more.
I was going to say, it feels like it's sped up, and within certainly the last 10 years, if not even less than that there's a sense of urgency to it that feels archetypal. I'm sure other people you would talk to in your interviews will have a more concrete way of describing that.
And a lot of them, Kenny, are talking about it feeling urgent to them. And there's I've talked to several people at this conference I just was in, and they were casual conversations. Some of them I've invited them onto the podcast, but they're all talking about this sense of urgency of growing and moving forward and expanding. And a couple of them looked at me and got tears in their eyes and said people don't understand, this is an emergency for us to keep growing on this level. And so people are feeling that sense of urgency. I didn't ask them the question. They were volunteering in that situation. Right. So I think that experience is probably a lot more accurate than we realize sometimes, I think.
Yeah, the light and the shadow are having it out.
Yes, they are. So I have one last question for you. And this is my favorite one, actually. It's my fun one. And that is, and it's perfect since you're driving along the highway right now. This is couldn't be better timing if we tried. I would like to know that if you could put a message on a billboard for the whole world to see, what would you put on that billboard?
Well, years ago I worked with a fellow who was a multimillionaire. Who does these ads in airports, and he'll say, "Courage, pass it on," or "Tenacity, pass it on," and he'll show somebody who's the example of courage or the example of stick-to-itiveness. And so I every time I look at those things, I shake my head and I wonder, is that doing any good at all? Does anybody actually read that and go, gee, I think I'll be courageous? I don't know.
For me, it would be choose love over fear.
Yeah.
Love trumps fear.
Yeah, and the one that came to me was trust love. Yeah, she said choose love over fear. It just, those are the messages I knew Burt Bacharach when he wrote What the World Needs Now is Love. And you think when you write a song like that it's in some way going to change the world. But I don't know, maybe I'm just old and cynical now, but I wonder about that. If the billboard is the way to go, I don't think a billboard is going to do all that much good, but I think that group flow, that the connected consciousness of people, that the more people, your listeners, for example, the more people who work on themselves, the more people who develop their consciousness, the more people who can extend that consciousness out into the ethers. That's where our billboard lives. That in sensing our connectedness, and in that way your radio show helps get the word out and tells people you're not alone. There are other people out there like you who believe that shifting consciousness can and does happen, and that really is the way for the planet to survive. And the people, I think the planet will survive either way. It's the people on the planet. Whether the species will survive now is sort of possibly the first time that's ever been a decision for human beings. And the sooner they can come to the awareness that every action and every thought affects that decision, the sooner we'll know whether we're going to make it.
Right on. So maybe the billboard would say, trust love, and then have a website underneath it with all the rest of it.
Right. Yes. Says billboard is trust love with a website. So more information, contact.
Right, exactly. Exactly. And then that way we could like put all the rest of the commentary on there, and that would answer the question. That's a brilliant answer. I love it. So I want to thank you for taking the time while you're driving to answer all these really fun questions that I came up with, and I hope I didn't put you on the spot too much. And I appreciate your time and your wisdom.
I hope thank you so much, and I hope your listeners appreciate you and the message you're putting out there.
Well, thank you. I think they do. I get a lot of emails and contact from people all the time saying comments about the different shows and things that I'm doing and the books I'm writing. A lot of people are excited about the Lightworkers Manual I just got an email from my editor that he's ready to receive it. I'm going to send it to him tomorrow. And so we're making lots of headway, and it kind of keeps the hope alive, to keep sharing all these great things. So I really appreciate you taking your time today.
My pleasure.
And so everybody, remember to keep your face to the sun so the shadows fall behind you. You've been listening to Mr. Kenny Loggins and me having another great conversation. So if you want to hear the beginning of this conversation, I will put the link in the show notes to the previous episode that we picked up from. And again, Kenny, thank you so much for being on the show. Thank you for listening. I trust you gained some valuable inspiration and information. Please join me and other visionaries in the Someone Gets Me Facebook group. Or for more information on my services and additional episode, visit someonegetsme.com. Again, thanks for listening.